Hi everybody, Steven here. In this video, I'm going to cover this thing called NSX Multi-Tenancy. Now it's been around for a while and there's different ways to kind of achieve multi-tenancy in NSX. But what we're going to look at is that relatively new feature called projects. So stick around, we'll see you in a bit. Hi everyone, thanks for sticking around. So in this video, this shouldn't be too long. I'm going to focus mainly on just doing a demo. We're going to talk about projects. When we talk about multi-tenancy in NSX, there's a few different ways it can be achieved by isolating tenants with their own tier 0 gateways or tier 1 gateways. We're going to look at projects. It streamlines the process a lot better. Projects have been available since, I believe it was 4.0.1, but that was only through APIs, and I'm not a big API guy. It came out in the GUI in 4.1, and I'm running 4.2.1 right now, so I've got the latest as of today of filming, so we'll take a look at that. Now, before we begin, I just want to do a shout out for those of you that subscribe to the channel. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. If you haven't subscribed to the channel and this is stuff that you're interested in, please support the channel by subscribing. It's totally free. Just click on that subscribe button and that's it. Other ways to support the channel is, again, liking and sharing videos. I've also got super thanks enabled, totally up to you. And for those of you that have submitted super thanks, again, thank you very much. Really appreciate it. And one last thing, just in regards to subscribing, again, folks, keep in the back of your mind, without subscribers, there's no creators. Therefore, there's no YouTube videos. This is how we get compensated by YouTube. So please take a second, hit that subscribe button. Anyways, why don't we begin? Before we begin, why don't we take a look at a couple slides here, just talking about multi-tenancy, and then we'll talk about projects. I think it'll make things a little bit easier to understand. I'll do a separate video on VPCs later, okay? It'll be very soon. So with NSX multi-tenancy, it's been around for a while. Now, I talk about routing in my NSX routing video, so you want to check that out. You need to understand all that stuff. One way to achieve, to do routing is what we refer to as a multi-tier or two-tier routing. You'll have your physical environment here, you'll have your tier 0 gateway, and then you have your tier 1's gateways sitting behind that, okay? That's one example. That's an example of a two-tier environment. VMware's been kind of pushing this as the multi-tenancy model, right? So I could actually have a tier 1 gateway here for tenant A, a tier 1 gateway here for tenant B, and a tier 1 gateway here for tenant C, okay? And then I have the provider gateway, that's my tier 0 gateway at the top. So I would give each tenant their own tier 1, and away they go. They got their own segments connected to it with their workloads and all that wonderful stuff. That's one way of doing it. There's other ways of doing multi-tenancy in NSX. You can give each tenant their own tier 0 gateway, or another thing called a VRF, virtual routing forwarding, or sort of a router within a router, okay? I'm not going to be focusing on those because projects is really taking this model and kind of going with it. So if I was going to use this model in a multi-tenancy environment, let's say, prior to NSX 4.0, again, I could spin up my tier 0 gateway and again, create my tier 1 gateways for each tenant, okay? Then I would basically go in and create users for those tenants and assign them the appropriate permissions on their tier 1 gateways. And I could use distributed firewalls and gateway firewalls, all that kind of stuff to isolate stuff. I'm going to do a separate video on projects and VPCs with security because we could spend a lot of time on that. All right, so what is a project then? So when I go into NSX, it sort of like takes that previous model, which I just talked about, takes it and says, okay, I'm going to call this a project, I'll call that a project, I'm going to call that a project. And it kind of does all this stuff for you, right? So when we look here, first of all, you see the provider environment. It's called the default space. And you'll see that when I go to do my demo. Inside the default space is all the stuff that your tenants would need to get connectivity to the outside world, to go north-south. So I see a tier 0 gateway. This could be a VRF as well. Okay, I've got my edge cluster or clusters. I just in this example, I'm just showing one cluster. So this is in my what they call the provider environment, or my default space. I then create projects. Within my projects, I then can assign project administrators. Okay, so I've got my blue project over here, project 1 with the blue administrator. I got project 2 with the green administrator. The project administrator can do anything they want within the project. This green administrator, project 2 administrator, cannot see anything inside project 1. They don't have access. Same thing with project 1. The administrator from there cannot manage project 2. That's kind of the whole point here. You, as the enterprise administrator, can see and manage everything within those projects. Okay, but you as the enterprise administrator, sorry, let me clear all this stuff, would create, it's not going forward here. There we go. You would create this tier 0 gateway. Things are hicking up. Would create that tier 0 gateway. Would create these edge cluster or clusters and assign it to your project or projects. Notice I've got this tier 0 gateway here, and I'm allowing projects 1 and 2 to use this. I could do that, no problems. I could create my own. I could create a tier 0 gateway for project 1, another tier 0 gateway for project 2 if I wanted to. I have that level of flexibility if I want to. The project administrators don't have access to this tier 0. What I mean is they can't modify it. Okay, they can see it if you assign it to the project. They can create their tier 1 gateways and link it to that tier 0 or VRF, and away they go. But they can't make any changes to that. So they see it, they can connect to it, and that's it. That allows them to get from north-south. So why don't we go ahead and do the demo right now, okay? Okay, so we're back. Let's jump into NSX here. One of the things, right now I am running NSX 4.2.1. Let me just adjust my volume here. I'm running 4.2.1. And you'll see over here I got this thing, this drop down, and it says default. Now, this came out in 4.1, I believe it was. Prior to that, you didn't see this in the GUI. You could do projects with 4.01, whatever it was. Anyways, you could have done it through APIs. 4.1, they introduced it in the GUI. So I'm running 4.2.1 right now. So you'll see you've got this default space. And the default space, if I click on this, you'll see, you know, that's it. I can see projects. It shows me manage. I've got nothing, no projects here. I just see this default space. And the default space is what you're used to working within your NSX environment. So if you're not doing projects or not doing multi-tenancy, you can just ignore this. And away you go. You see my networking and security inventory, my system view. You see all the fabric and my hosts and my nodes and all that kind of wonderful stuff. Typical NSX stuff here, right? Now, what I've done is in my environment, I've already created, this is my default space, so think of that as the provider space. I've already created my tier 0 gateway. Let me go back into my iPad here. Let's go into this and let's clear all this. So I'm right now in my provider space. I've got to create my tier 0 gateway, which I've already done. I'm not going to bore you with that. I've already created my edge cluster. If you don't know how to do those, you have to watch my NSX routing videos, okay? You need all that stuff, the basics. I also, what they don't show you in this picture, I also have to create my uplinks to the outside world. This is my outside world here, my physical router. So these are VLAN back segments. I, as the provider, need to do all that stuff, okay, in the provider space. So let's go back to my environment. You'll see there's my edge nodes. I've got an edge cluster. If I click on networking here, I got a tier 0 gateway. There's my tier 0 gateway. And I've got my now I've already got this all configured with interfaces, and it's connecting to my northbound routers. Let me click on segments here. I've got my uplink segments. These are all VLAN back. So I've got my tier 0 gateway, the provider gateway, connecting to my physical router in my environment, and I've got peering with BGP. If you don't know how to do that, you got to watch my NSX routing videos. I'm not going to go through that because this is not part of it. Okay. Now I'm going to create a project. So let's go in and create a project here. Let's go under default. I'm going to say manage, and I'm going to say, under here you see this default space. That's your, I guess you can look at that as a default project. Okay. All right. I'm going to click on add project. And the first thing it's going to ask me is the project name. So a project is basically like a tenant. So if you've got, let's say I'm, my company's tech unglued, and I got the sales department, the engineering department, I got the marketing department, whatever. I've got all these different departments, right? And if I want each department to manage their own environment, I could actually create projects based on that. Oh, I'm going to create an engineering department. Here, you manage your networking and workloads, right? Oh, test and development, I'm going to make a project for that. You manage that. I could do stuff like that. Or if I'm a hosting provider, I can say ABC company, here's your project. XYZ company, here's your project, okay? So I'm just going to create one here called sales, all right? Now over here it says Tier 0 gateway. When I click on this, you'll see the Tier 0 gateway here shows up. Now, that's the one I already created from before. Now, there's a little thing I want to point out here. See this little information box? I'm going to click, I'm going to highlight that. It says the Tier 0 gateway is running on edge clusters that are associated with the default overlay transport zone, NSX overlay transport zone, are listed in the selection. And that's kind of a big gotcha here, right? You will not, notice when I click in here, you see my Tier 0 gateway. When I first started playing with this, I couldn't see my Tier 0 gateway. And I'm going, what's going on? Let me cancel this. When you create your environment, let me go to system here, still my default. I go to fabric. If I go to transport zones, and if you've watched any of my videos before, I've created overlay transport zones and VLAN transport zones. What it's saying is, you want to get into this multi-tenancy stuff, your Tier 0 gateways must be using edge clusters that are part of this NSX overlay transport zone. That's the default one that's created when you set up NSX. If it's not, if you don't have it using this, it will not show up as a selection, okay? So I had to go back in and create my Tier 0 gateway and have it use an edge cluster that's using this. And even my compute resources as well, okay, because they got to talk to the edge, all right? So let's go back into here. Let's go back into manage. Let's create that project again. So let's go sales. I'll pick my Tier 0 gateway. And I already talked about, I pointed out over here. Now it says edge clusters. And I'll select this, and it allows me to pick this edge cluster. And this is the part that I find a little bit confusing. This is optional. If remember, your project's gonna, you're gonna say, hey, project admin, here's your project. They're gonna create Tier 1 gateways in there. And if they want to have services on that, I want to do a VPN service, or I want to do DHCP or something like that. I don't think VPN supported. Anyway, it doesn't matter. If I want to have services on there, which they probably will, they may or may not. Then you have to pick a cluster here, because remember, it needs to instantiate an SR on that for that Tier 1. If you plan on doing just a DR component, in other words, no services on the Tier 1, which you could do as a project admin, you don't need an edge cluster, right? And this is the part that I find a little bit confusing. When I go over to this thing, it says edge clusters that are associated with the default overlay transport zone, NSX overlay transport zones, are listed here. So it's saying you have to be part of that default overlay transport zone, which I find it a little bit weird, because if I just want it for services, technically I don't really need to be part of an overlay network. Anyways, it is what it is. I'm going to pick my edge cluster here. Okay. This external IP4 blocks used for public VPC subnets. We'll talk about VPCs in another video, so I'll come back to this, don't worry, but in another video. We don't really need this just for projects. Log identifier. So yeah, if I get different tenants or whatever, I probably want their log and audit entries to come up with something unique to identify that. So maybe I'll type in sales. So any log entries will have the set up to it. Now, activate default distributed firewall rules. Since the default rule allows communications between workloads within a project, sounds good, including communications with a DHCP server. All other communications is blocked. Again, I'll do a separate video on security with projects, because that could get a little bit deep into the water. So we'll check that out a little bit later. But I'm going to leave this. Now, by the way, in order for this stuff to work, you need to be licensed for this, for the security, or else none of the security stuff, it'll show you there, but it won't be activated. I'll do a separate video on that. This one's interesting. Organize NSX port groups in vCenter. It says when you turn this on, it says port groups created in vCenter as a result of segments. So we know NSX segments are basically overglorified vSphere virtual distributed switch port groups. They're basically port groups on steroids. Okay. It says subnets created in VPCs inside this project will also be grouped in subfolders. So it says projects will be grouped in a folder. So what they're saying is, when you've got this project here, when you create segments, it's going to create port groups on my distributed switch that's been prepared for NSX. Do you want those segments or port groups in a folder on its own, like for sales? Here's the sales tenant and all its port groups. Oh, here's the engineering tenant and all its port groups. That might be a good idea, right? So I'm going to select this here to show you what it does. The rest of the stuff I'm just going to leave alone. I'm going to go save. It's asking me, do I want to do any other configuration here? I'm going to say yes for the hell of it. I'm going to say yes. And then under here, users and groups, I can click on set. And at this point, I can do role assignments for my users here. Okay, so this is actually for my project. I can pick local users, right? Which I really don't, I don't really have any created here, not yet. And I can actually go in and set what users have access here. I'm going to cancel this. I'll come back to this and show you how to do this outside. Let me close this. Let's close editing. Okay, there's sales. Let's add another project. Let's engineering. ENG sounds good to me. I'll pick the tier 0 gateway. It's the same one. I could pick the same one, or I could pick a different one. I'll pick that same cluster. It could be a different one if I want to. My log identifier will go ENG, and I'm not going to worry about IP blocks. I'm going to leave this one not selected for the port group, so you'll see the difference. I'm going to go save. Do I want to do any more configuration? I'm going to say no. All right, so I just created 2 projects. I'm going to go close, and then under here, under default, you'll see I can go to engineering. I can look at stuff in the engineering project, or I can go into sales. Let's go in and assign permissions to this. Okay? Hey, by the way, if you haven't already subscribed to the channel, hey, please support the channel by subscribing to it. It's free. Just click that subscribe button. Okay, so we have our 2 projects, engineering and sales. Let me go back into the default view. Under system here, under system, let's go into user management, and I'm going to create a user here. I'm going to let's go to local users, and you'll see, I got some local users, the admin, the audit. There's a guest user. There's also got a Steve user. I don't have this integrated with Active Directory. I could use users from Active Directory. I don't really have that set up right now. I'm just going to create a local user to do this demo with projects. I'm going to go add local user. I'll just call it sales, okay? And I'll say save. Okay, we'll give it a few seconds. Maybe a bit more in a few seconds. Come on. Here we go. I'm going to add another one, another local user, and I'll call it ENG for engineering. Actually, I should call it admin. ENG admin, let's save. But I probably should have called it sales admin. All right, so let's fix that one. Let's do sales admin. Oops. Just to make it a little bit clearer, sales admin. I'll get rid of that other one. All right, so I'm creating some local users here. Again, if you have this integrated with Active Directory, you could actually pick and choose Active Directory users. Okay, give that a second. Let's go in and delete this. Yes. Now, you'll notice over here, one of the things, you can see it right now while it's gurgling, status, it's not active over here. So you'll see sales admin and engineering admin, they're not active. Give it a few seconds. There we go. It's not active. Sales admin is not active. Let's click on this, go activate user. And to activate it, you just give it a password. And again, you follow the restrictions kind of mentioned below, and I'll say save, and we give that a few seconds. There we go. So you now see sales admin is active. All right, if I go into engineering admin, let's make this activate this user. So the engineering admin, again, just putting in a password. Again, like I said before, I could have used AD groups, but anyways, I just got this local stuff set up here. Well, I go to user role assignment. If I click on here, you'll see engineering's been set the auditor. These new users have been given the auditor role. In other words, they have read-only access to my environment. I don't want that. Let me just go and delete that role. Let's go edit. Let's go into here. I'm going to go auditor. I'm going to go delete. Let's see if it lets me just save it without any roles. There we go. So there's save. Okay, so it won't let me do it without. All right, we'll come back to that in a second. All right, so what I want to do now is maybe go in and assign roles to this. I want to assign a role to this user, right? So let's select it. I'm going to go edit. I'm going to go into roles here. I'm going to go into add a role. And I'm going to pick a role over here. And I'm going to, again, notice there's VPC admin. We'll talk about VPC another one. Here's project admin over here. I'm going to click project admin. I'm going to go set for the scope. And that was the engineering. So I'm going to pick the engineering project. And I'm going to say apply. And I'm going to say add. Now notice it still has that auditor role. That means it would still have read access in the default view. I don't want them doing that. I'm going to get rid of that. There we go. So now they'll only have access to the project admin project. Engineering project. Sorry about that. Let's save this. There we go. So you now see engineering admin. Again, it has the project admin on the project. Let's go in and do it another different way. Let's go into sales here. Let's edit the sales. Let's go back to manage. Let's go into my sales project edit, and under set here, under user, I can go add role assignment. So I could actually do it within there. I'll pick a local user. Notice I could have picked an LDAP if I had that set up. So I'm going to type in sales admin. I'm going to go select the role. And then under here, pick the role. These are all the roles. Again, I could assign a project. No, there's VPC admin and stuff like that. We'll talk about VPCs later. All right. Security admin, if I just want this person managing firewalls in the project, reviewing project, or network admin. So there's certain roles within a project you can assign someone. I'm going to give this person the project admin. And I'm going to, I'll say add. And I'll say apply. And I'll say save. And yeah, so you see it's the sales admin, project admin. Okay, good. Close that. And we can say close editing. There we go. And we're done. So sales. So let's go back into the default view now. I'll go back under system here. Let's just double check everything. So I see engineering admin has project admin on one project. If I click on that, it's engineering. Sales admin has project admin on one project, and that's sales. Great, that's exactly what I want. All right, so let's actually log out as one and log in as another. So let me log out as admin, and let's log in as engineering. Sorry, it's engineering admin. Okay, so notice again my view is a little different here. Whatever. And over here, you see I got VPCs. I still have networking, security, inventory, plan and troubleshooting system. Let's click on some of these. So I'm the engineering admin logging into my project. I don't see, my host and transport nodes and all that. All I see is certificates and overview. Plan and troubleshoot, I only see using Traceflow. Inventory, I have various objects I can look at, groups. I don't really have a whole lot of stuff here. If I click on virtual machines, I don't see any. I'll talk about VPCs in another video. Security, again, I basically see distributed firewall, IDS, and gateways. I don't really see all the other stuff. And then under networking, I see tier 1 gateways. I don't see tier 0s. I can't create one. I see segments, VPNs, and NAT. I see some services I'm able to play with. So again, I don't see my tier 0 gateways. I don't see those. Remember the segments I created? I don't see those here. So I only see the segments and gateways I create. So let me go in and create one. How about that? Let's go create a tier 1 gateway. Add tier 1. I'll call this tier 1-engineering. I'm going to make this distributed only. I'm going to pick my tier 0. Again, because I assign that I'm the enterprise admin, I assigned this gateway to this project. The engineering admin can pick this gateway. All right. That sounds pretty good. Route advertisements. I'll say route all connected networks. And I'll say save. And I'm going to say, no, I don't want to make any more configurations. Let's go in and then add some segments. Let's create one segment here. We'll call this engineering segment. And again, it's going to connect to the tier 1 gateway for engineering, which I just created. And what's its IP or whatever. It's 172.16.10.1/24. That looks good. And then I'm just going to save this. So again, no, I don't want to continue on. So very similar. So projects, for you to manage a project as a project admin, you're using the NSX interface. So you have to, how to create segments, how to do gateways, how to, advertise that network out. Very similar, okay? When I get into VPCs in another video, you see it's going to be different. It'll be technically easier for somebody that doesn't know the NSX environment. All right, let's log out. Actually, yeah, I got the engineering segment over here, which is interesting. Let's log out and let's go back in as sales. Sales admin. Okay, skip. I must have still given. Oh, that's interesting. I don't see VPCs here. Okay, so that's kind of interesting here. See how one of the things that's kind of a red flag to me. I should have seen that default, dark type mode screen here. But what I don't see up there is I don't see VPCs. Okay, what's going on here? I go under system here. I can see fabrics. I'm logged into sales admin. What's going on? I've messed up. Something's wrong here. If I go into user management, I don't think it's going to show me right now. You see over here, sales admin. It's got the auditor role. I guess I thought I removed that, but obviously it didn't take or whatever, right? I'm not going to be able to edit this because I got auditor role. So sales admin seen all this stuff it really shouldn't. So I messed up. Let me just log out. Probably kind of a good thing for you folks to see that, because I just logged in as a tenant and they got visibility to stuff that they shouldn't really have visibility to. Let me skip this. There's the admin role. Great. Let's go into here. Let's go back into user management. Let's go back into sales admin. Maybe I didn't commit it. Edit. Roles here. Auditor. Delete. Yep. Okay. Apply. Save. Maybe I didn't save it. Sales admin, one project. Okay, there, that's exactly what I want. Let's log out. Log back into sales admin. So I'm logging into salesman is the other project. Yeah, whatever. And surprised I didn't go with the default view. But anyways, I'll leave that. I do see VPC, which is here. Great. I don't see anything else. I go under system here. I don't really see anything else. That's great. If I go into my networking here, what do I see? Tier 1 gateways. I don't see anything. This project does not have a gateway. This project does not have segments. So I don't see any of the other stuff. So again, this does that security for you. Like I said, I'll talk about security and stuff in a separate video because that's going to take a lot longer. Let's create a tier 1 gateway here. Let's add gateway. We'll call it tier 1-sales. I'm just going to make this distributed only. I'm going to pick that tier 0 gateway. Again, because that gateway was assigned this project, so I'm allowed to pick it. Distributed only. That looks good. Route advertisements. Again, this is the part where in projects, you got to kind of know all this stuff here in NSX. Again, when we get the VPCs, we'll see it's different. Okay, I'm going to click on save. I don't need to make any more changes. I'll go segments. Let's add another segment. Let's go sales, segment, whatever. I'll pick my gateway for sales. I'll pick, again, notice the transport zone. It's whatever the project had, which is that default overlay. And I'll put in my subnetwork 172.16.80.1/24. And then, yeah, that sounds good. I'll go save it. No, I don't want to do anything here. Great. So we see that. Let's go back in as admin here. Let me log out. Let's go back in as admin. And let's see what we see here. Okay, let's skip this. So again, under the default view, if I go into networking here, if I go into tier 0 gateway, I see my tier 0 gateways, segments. I only see my uplinks that I created. Okay. So I remember I created these uplinks to get to the outside world for my tenants, right? Well, why don't I see my tenants segments here? I click on tier 1s. I don't see my tenants gateways here. In order for me as the enterprise admin to see this stuff, I got to go into all projects view. The all projects view is just like I said, all projects. It's a read-only view. So I see, oh, there's the tier 1 engineering. Oh, there's the tier 1 sales, and I can go in and look at it, right? If I go to edit, it's going to say edit in project view. Remember, this is a read-only view. So for me to go in and edit, I could click on this right now if I wanted to. Or I can just go into here. I'm the enterprise admin. I'm going to go into sales. Now I see the sales gateway. I can go in and edit if I want to. So I have to go inside that project to do editing. But the all project is a read-only view showing you everything. Okay? Again, if I click on segments, I see my engineering and sales segment. So you even see a little tag here, engineering, see a tag for segment, sales. You see the default view over here. So it gives you these little tags or bubbles kind of showing you what's there. Okay? So that's the default view. Again, engineering and sales and so on. Okay? What does it look like in vSphere? Interesting. So let's go into vSphere. I've already logged into vSphere. Now, in my vSphere environment, let me go over to here. I'm going to go to my host and clusters view. Let me minimize this. I've got 2 vSphere clusters. Okay? This is just the way I'm set up. Your environment's going to be set up differently. I got a compute cluster that's been prepared for NSX. That means the hosts in here have TEPs or tunnel endpoints. So host 1, 2, and 3. They're going to basically be part of my overlay networks. Then I got a management edge cluster. I got a separate cluster here, hosts 4, 5, and 6, just for edge nodes. That's it. Those hosts are not prepared for NSX. When I go into my distributed switches now, let's minimize this stuff. You'll see there's my data center. Now over here, you'll see I got some regular port groups. These are standard port groups. And I've got 3 distributed switches, just the way my environment's set up. I've got a distributed switch for my management edge cluster. Okay, that's great. There's nothing to do with NSX. Then my compute cluster actually has 2 distributed switches. One for the vMotion and management and all that. And my compute cluster also has a distributed switch for just NSX stuff. So my host in my compute cluster has 4 network cards. 2 of them for the first distributed switch for vSphere stuff, and the other 2 network cards are for NSX stuff. Okay, your environment could be configured differently, and that's fine. Notice I called my VDS NSX, right? So this is now when I go to here, you'll see I've got an engineering segment. Remember, your your NSX segments come up as port groups in your distributed switch, and I see that engineering segment. Remember, I created that. I was the engineering admin. I created a segment. I see it there. Okay. Now, what happened to the sales segment? Remember over here, NSX managed folders. Remember for the sales project, I selected that thing to create folders for me. Okay. I didn't do that for engineering. So because I selected that, it created this folder, and within there you see sales, the tenant, and then the sales segment over there. So it's a way for you to kind of organize this. If I selected it for engineering, I'd also see, an engineering folder here. So totally up to you if you want to organize it like that. I kind of find it a little confusing seeing this extra level here. But anyways, that's just me. So that might be a good thing. I'll leave it up to you. All right. Now, let me go back into NSX here, and I'm just going to go into the, notice right now I'm in, let me just go to default. Under default, if I go inventory, if I go virtual machines, I see all the virtual machines in my environment. Notice it said they're not connected. So these are all the VMs that vCenter Server, my compute manager, reported back to NSX. Let's go into the engineering view. Now the engineering view, this is basically what the engineering admin, I could log out and you would see this. I don't see any VMs, and I've already showed you that. If I go into the sales, there's no VMs there. So they would not see anything. The assignment, again, all this stuff does is management of the network. So it's going to create the network, and it's up to your automation tools, whatever, when it creates the VMs or whatever, to assign it to the appropriate network. Okay? So I'm going to do this within vSphere. Let me just go into my host and clusters view. Let's go to compute here. Let's go to database 1. Again, I don't care what VM. I'm going to go edit settings. Let's go my network adapter here. I'm going to browse. And I'm going to pick the engineering segment for that VM. I'm going to say OK. Let's pick this other VM, web. I don't care what they are, web. And then I'm going to go in and pick the, where is sales segment. I'll pick sales segment for that. Okay. It's okay. Give that a second. Let's go back into NSX. Let's go back into, again, let's go back into, well, I guess the default view sounds good to me. Notice now, database is showing me it's on the engineering segment for the engineering project. And same thing with web. It's it's actually just showing me the project here, the engineering project and sales project. If I go back into the engineering view, now you see it there. If I go back into sales view, I see the appropriate VMs. If you don't believe me, let me log out. Let me log in as engineering. Oops. Oh, sorry, it wasn't ng admin. And again, if I go into inventory VMs, again, I see that database one because it's on that. Again, if, it's on that port group or on that segment. Okay. But that's basically it for projects. It's a kind of takes what we were doing before and puts an interface for and provides the security around it. Like I said, I'll do a separate video on firewalls and stuff. One other thing is services. Under services, if I go under networking services, you can see you can do VPNs and NATing, DNS and IP pools as well. We'll talk about this stuff, especially IP pools, when we get into VPCs and stuff like that. They don't mention, but you can also do DHCP. So there's a list of services that are supported as well. But that's basically it, folks. I hope you found this useful. I hope you found it entertaining. Do me a favor, if you like this video or you found it entertaining, hit that like button. Also, please support the channel by by subscribing to it. I really appreciate it if you do that. Also, leave any comments and questions down below. I like to get back to anybody that leaves comments. I always like to answer them. And if there's something you want me to do or you want me to cover something, please leave that in the comment section down below as well. I'll do my best. Right now, there's been changes, as you're aware of. It's kind of getting access to some of the software is a little bit challenging these days. Anyhow, folks, that's it. Thanks again. See you in the next one. Bye now.